I was on a solo 3-day backpacking trip through the Nantahala National Forest in North Carolina. I'd planned the route carefully, keeping it within my limits. I wasn't trying to be some survivalist hero, just needed to get out for a bit, get away from people, work, everything. The trail I picked was moderately trafficked in good weather, but I timed it during a quieter stretch in late spring when the crowds hadn't shown up yet. The first day was uneventful. Quiet, a little muggy, but the trail was solid, and I made good progress. I set up my tent by a creek, cooked some pasta on the small camp stove, and fell asleep to the sound of running water and distant owls. Nothing weird. The second day started fine. The air was heavier, clouds rolling in early. I figured I might get rained on, so I packed up quick and hit the trail. Around midday, the storm hit. No warning, just sudden thunder, and then rain, heavy and loud. It drenched the canopy, turning the dirt trail slick and muddy. The wind started pushing sideways, and I didn't want to deal with soaking gear for the rest of the day. I pulled my poncho over my pack, zipped up my jacket, and decided to go a little off-trail to look for natural shelter. Maybe a rock outcropping or dense trees. That's when I saw it. Through the sheets of rain, maybe 50 yards off-trail, a small wooden cabin. It was just there, standing in the trees. No path leading to it. No tire marks. No signs anyone had been coming or going. It looked weathered, not broken down but old, grayish wood, moss in patches along the lower walls, a sloped tin roof. I hesitated. I'd read too many backwoods horror stories to feel totally comfortable, but I was soaked through and tired. My boots were caked in mud, and my clothes were sticking to me. I figured if it was a hunter's cabin or an old ranger outpost, maybe it was empty this time of year. I just needed a break from the rain, somewhere to sit and dry off a little. The door was cracked open maybe 6 inches. Not wide, but enough to see the inside was dark. I stepped up to it and knocked. Not loud, just a couple of times to make sure I wasn't walking in on someone's place. No answer. I called out. Nothing. I opened the door fully. The inside was strange. It wasn't abandoned the way I expected. There was a cot in the corner, neatly made with a wool blanket folded at the end. A small wooden shelf held maybe 10 or 12 cans of food, beans, corn, soup, lined up in rows. A rusted tin cup and a cast iron pan sat on a small table. No fridge, no electricity. Just a single chair and a lantern on a hook. The floor was wooden, not dirty. No leaves, no dust buildup, no cobwebs in the corners. That's what got me. It wasn't messy, but it also didn't look unused. It looked lived in, maintained. And it didn't smell like old cabins usually do. No mul, no mastirot. It just smelled faintly of wood and smoke, like a campfire had been out not too long ago. Something about how clean it was unsettled me. Most places in the woods, if they're left alone, collect dust, bugs, leaves, signs of weather. This place looked like someone had stepped out only an hour ago. I didn't want to hang around too long, just needed to take off my pack, catch my breath, and decide whether to wait out the storm or keep going. I sat on the edge of the cot and took a sip from my water bottle. That's when I heard it. A branch snapped outside. Not the kind that falls randomly. This was clean, sudden. A step. I didn't move at first. My ears were still adjusting after being inside. But then I heard it again. Something shifting in the wet brush outside. I got up slowly and moved to the small window on the side of the cabin. It was just a narrow slat cut into the wood with a wooden bar across it. I looked through it carefully. There, maybe 20 feet away, was someone standing behind a tree. I could only see part of them, just half a body. They were mostly hidden behind the trunk, but enough was showing for me to see it wasn't an animal. It was a person. No movement. Just standing there, watching the cabin. My stomach dropped. My first thought was maybe it was the owner. Maybe I was trespassing. But if it was their place, why not say something? Why just stand there? I backed away from the window, quietly grabbed my pack and put it on. My boots squelched slightly against the floor. I thought about staying inside, locking the door, but that felt worse. I didn't know if there was a back door, a cellar, anything. I didn't know how many people were out there. I didn't want to wait around to find out. I opened the door slowly, making as little sound as I could, then slipped out and turned left, away from where I saw the figure. I didn't run. Running makes noise. Running draws attention. I walked fast, keeping my eyes moving, ears wide open. The rain had let up a little, but everything was wet, and the sound of my steps felt too loud. I didn't go back to the main trail. I moved at a diagonal, just trying to put distance between me and that cabin. I hiked for hours, barely stopping. I didn't eat. I didn't drink. I just wanted to get away. By the time the sun was dropping low, I found a small ridge that overlooked a dry patch of forest. No open sight lines, but no obvious shelter either. I set up camp as fast as I could, just a tarp over my tent, skipping dinner, skipping everything. My hands shook the entire time. Every stick breaking in the distance made me flinch. I kept turning off my headlamp every few minutes, trying to let my eyes adjust to the dark, just in case someone was nearby watching. That night, I didn't sleep much. Maybe an hour or two in total. I didn't hear anything else, but I couldn't stop thinking about that cabin. About the way it looked lived in, but had no personal items. No clothes, no trash, no signs of who stayed there. About the person behind the tree. No movement, just watching. The next morning, I didn't waste time. I packed up early and made my way back toward the original trail. I didn't care about finishing the loop. I just wanted out. I stayed sharp, kept my compass in hand, followed the terrain until I found the main trail again around noon. Once I was back on it, the tension in my shoulders started to drop. I didn't see anyone else the rest of the day, but I kept looking behind me. Every bend, every rise. When I got to my car the next morning, after another full day of hiking, I locked the doors immediately and didn't take a real breath until I hit the main road. I kept thinking I should report the cabin. But to who? There was no address, no marker, no obvious crime. Just a place that shouldn't be there, kept too clean, too quiet, too ready. And someone in the woods who didn't want company. I haven't gone hiking alone since. We were somewhere deep in northern Michigan, a good few miles off any marked trail. My friend Dylan and I had been hiking since early morning, just picking a direction and pushing through the underbrush. No GPS, just a paper topo map, a compass, and the usual gear: hydration packs, knives, headlamps, emergency food. We weren't doing anything risky, just off-trail hiking, bushwhacking through dense woods for the sake of exploring. We'd done it before. Michigan's forests are thick, especially this far up north. Pine and birch everywhere, ground covered in ferns, fallen logs, and thorny brush. You can go hours without seeing anything man-made. That was kind of the point. The weather was dry and overcast. The kind of day where everything feels muffled. No wind, no birds chirping, just the crunch of our boots on dead leaves and the occasional buzz of a mosquito. I remember we hadn't spoken much for a while. The silence had stretched between us naturally. After a few hours of hiking, talking just slows down. That's when we found it. It was set back behind a thick clump of spruce trees. At first I thought it was just more fallen lumber, but then I caught the right angle and saw the shape, an old deer blind. Elevated, wooden, nailed between two thick trees, maybe 10 feet up. The platform looked weathered, the boards gray and warped. The ladder was barely holding together, more like a suggestion of steps than anything solid. You could tell it had been there for years. Dylan stopped and looked at me. Neither of us said anything, but I could tell we were thinking the same thing. Who the hell would still be using this? It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Still, I was curious. I told him I was going to climb it. He stayed on the ground while I tested the first rung. It creaked but held. Carefully, I made my way up, one step at a time. When I got to the platform, I pulled myself up and stepped inside. The inside was cramped, just enough space for maybe 2 people to sit side by side. 3 of the walls were intact. The 4th one partly collapsed, letting in light and air. There were gaps between the boards where I could see the forest floor. It smelled like damp wood and old smoke. Not just any smoke, recent smoke. That ashy, campfire scent that doesn't linger forever. It hit me hard. I looked down. There was a rolled-up sleeping bag in the corner, faded blue. A pair of boots stood beside it, mud-caked, heavy-duty, definitely used. And in the middle of the floor, face up, was a Polaroid photo. It must have been taken years ago. The color was faded, edges curled. The man in the picture was middle-aged, thin, with patchy facial hair and a missing front tooth. He was smiling like he'd just heard a good joke. Behind him was the same blind I was standing in, no question. I turned the photo over. In shaky handwriting, it said, * my place. Keep out, *. I stared at that for a long second, my fingers cold despite the mild weather. The boots didn't look abandoned. The sleeping bag didn't have dust on it. And that smell, it wasn't old smoke. Then I heard it. A dry, loud crack, like a branch snapping. I went still and peeked out one of the wall gaps, trying not to move too fast. From that height, I could see Dylan below me. He was frozen, facing away from the blind. About 20 feet in front of him stood a man. He was tall, lanky, maybe in his 50s or 60s. He wore a flannel shirt stained with something dark around the cuffs and jeans stiff with grime. His face was weathered, jaw stubbled, gray hair poking out under a dirty cap. In his hands was a crossbow. It wasn't aimed, but it wasn't slung over his shoulder either. It was held ready, low but firm. He didn't say anything, didn't yell, didn't threaten. Just lifted one hand slowly and pointed right up at me. Then he pointed at the photo in my hand. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Felt like minutes, probably just seconds. My heart was thudding so loud I could hear it in my ears. Dylan didn't move. I couldn't even see his face, but I could tell he was frozen like I was. Not panicking, but definitely afraid. I didn't say a word. I tucked the photo back down on the floor where I'd found it, stepped back from the opening, and started climbing down. Slow and controlled, not rushing. The ladder groaned under my weight, but didn't break. When my boots hit the ground, I looked up. The man hadn't moved. He was still standing there, staring at both of us. We didn't run. That would have felt like the wrong move. We turned around, didn't speak, and started walking. The same direction we'd come. I remember how hard it was not to keep looking back over my shoulder. We didn't stop for water, didn't take breaks, didn't check the map. Just moved, steady and quiet, through dense brush and soft moss, over down trees and shallow dips. I could hear Dylan's breath, sharp and fast through his nose. Mine wasn't any better. After maybe 2 miles, the forest started to thin out. We found a section of trail we'd crossed earlier in the day and followed it until we hit the dirt road where our car was parked. Even once we were in the car, engine running, doors locked, we didn't speak. Not for a while. When we finally did, it was just basic stuff. Directions. Where to stop for gas. Neither of us brought up the photo, or the man, or the crossbow. Not that night. Not for a few days, even. We didn't report it. I don't know if that was the right choice. Maybe we should have told someone, DNR, a ranger, even the sheriff. But what would we say? We trespassed, found someone's blind, and saw a guy with a crossbow on his own land? Technically, he hadn't done anything. Didn't chase us, didn't threaten us, didn't speak. Still, something about it felt wrong. That blind wasn't a hunting post anymore. It was a home, a hidden, private place. Someone was living out there, deep in the woods. Not off-grid in a romantic way. Not camping. More like hiding. And we weren't supposed to find it. I still think about that photo. The way he was smiling. Not casual. Not friendly. It was a hard smile. Like he knew something we didn't. I've been back to northern Michigan since then, but never off trail. Not like that. I stick to marked paths now, places other people walk. And I always pay attention when the woods go quiet. It was early October when I set off into the backcountry of western Montana. I'd taken a few weeks off work to disconnect, hoping to hit some of the less traveled forest preserves before the weather turned. I had topo maps, my GPS, and a full pack. The place I picked wasn't on the usual hiking circuit. No marked trails, no ranger posts. Just logging roads that turned to rock and brush and finally disappeared under trees and thyme. The air smelled like damp pine and cold dirt. There were no tire tracks on the way in, and once I stepped out of the truck and hiked a few miles, I didn't see any footprints but mine. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses in on you. I heard nothing but my own footsteps, the wind moving branches, and the occasional cry of a hawk overhead. It took most of the first day to reach a good spot to camp near a slow creek. I set up, made dinner, and sat by the fire until the stars came out, thick and sharp above the black trees. I slept well that night. The second day, I went exploring. I wasn't following any path, just moving in a wide loop through the thick trees and slopes. The ground was uneven, old deadfall everywhere, and I was constantly stepping over fallen trunks and pushing aside branches. A few hours in, I came to a steep ravine. It wasn't too deep, but the angle was sharp and the sides were covered in moss and wet leaves. I almost turned back but noticed something at the bottom. Blue, faded, and crumpled. I thought it might be trash at first, a tarp or some old gear someone abandoned. I climbed down slowly, digging my boots into the hillside. When I got close, I realized it was a tent, a small, cheap kind you'd buy from a gas station. The fabric was sun-bleached and slumped to one side, the poles snapped or bent. It looked like it had been there for months, maybe longer. I stood there for a second, looking around. The forest was still. I called out, just a quick hey, in case someone was nearby. No answer. I hesitated, then pulled the flap back. Inside was a mess. Crumpled food wrappers, plastic bottles, some old cans with rust curling their labels. There was a sleeping bag too, rolled halfway open and damp with mold. No clothes, no backpack, no sign of who had been there. I saw a notebook tucked under one corner of the sleeping bag. It was water-stained and warped, but the cover was still intact, plain black, the kind you buy for school. I flipped it open and skimmed a few pages. It wasn't journal entries. No full sentences, just lists, lines of dates, places, short notes. One read, August 14th, truck came back. Another said, watch from the ridge, stay low. And another, written in large block letters, don't leave at night. There were dozens of entries like that. Some had coordinates, which looked like GPS points. Others had arrows or symbols I didn't recognize. But no names, no explanation. It felt strange, like someone had been tracking movements, watching something, or someone. I don't know. I flipped a few more pages, then shut it and slipped it into my pack. I don't know why I kept it. Instinct, maybe. Or just not wanting to leave it there. I climbed out of the ravine and kept hiking, making a wider arc back toward my camp. I didn't feel right after that. Like I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just some off-grid person living rough. Maybe paranoid. Maybe just not right in the head. But that last line, don't leave at night, stuck with me. I got back to camp a little before dusk. Cooked dinner. Tried to read. Tried not to think about the notebook or the rotted tent. The trees around my site felt thicker than before. The wind had died completely, and the quiet was heavier now. It was about 9 p.m. when I saw it. I'd been sitting in my camp chair, sipping the last of my coffee, when a flash of light flickered across the valley. I froze. It wasn't fire. It wasn't lightning. It was quick and sharp, like sunlight hitting a mirror. A deliberate glint. Then again, a little lower. I turned off my lantern and sat still in the dark. My eyes adjusted slowly. Across the valley, maybe half a mile away on a ridge, I saw it again. A flash. Then nothing. Just trees and the faint glow of the moon behind clouds. My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen a single person in 2 days. I was deep into unmaintained land. No signs of recent human traffic. And now, in the exact direction of that strange notebook and broken tent, there was a signal. I didn't wait. I grabbed my gear and packed up fast, jamming stuff into my bag. No folding, no organizing. Just stuffed it all in. I strapped my headlamp on, double-checked the compass, and started walking out. It's not smart to hike at night in that kind of terrain. Slopes, drop-offs, no real trail. But I didn't care. I moved fast and quiet, taking wide angles around valleys and avoiding ridges. I kept my light low, just enough to avoid breaking an ankle. I listened for footsteps, voices, anything. but I only heard the forest breathing around me. It took me almost 6 hours to reach the logging road. I kept moving until I hit the spot where I'd parked, dead tired and wide-eyed. The truck was untouched. I climbed in, locked the doors, and sat there for a while before starting the engine. I didn't stop until I hit a small town with a motel, checked in, threw the pack on the floor, and took a long shower. In the morning, I opened my bag and pulled out the notebook. I thought about reading it again, trying to figure out what those notes meant. But I didn't. I stuck it in the bottom drawer of my nightstand at home, under some old tax papers. It's still there. I haven't opened it since. Sometimes I think about that light, about the person who camped in that ravine, about the things they saw, the way they wrote, like they were being hunted, or maybe watching someone else. I don't hike off-grid anymore. Not like that. I stick to marked trails now, places with people. Sometimes I still wake up thinking I saw that flash again. And I wonder, if I'd stayed one more night, would someone have come into my camp? Or stood there in the dark, watching me? I'll never know, but I'm not going back. My cousin Ryan and I had planned this trip for weeks. We weren't doing the whole Pacific Crest Trail, just a small weekend stretch in Northern California, a section popular enough but still remote in parts. It was mid-September, just cool enough to need a light jacket in the mornings but warm during the day. We parked at a trailhead around noon on a Friday, signed into the logbook at the ranger station, loaded up our packs, and started walking. We weren't deep into the wild. We passed a few other hikers earlier that day, heading the opposite way. Some older couples with walking poles, a few solo backpackers, even a dad with 2 teenagers. The trail wasn't exactly packed, but it didn't feel isolated either. The plan was to hike in about 10 miles, make camp, and return the same way by Sunday afternoon. We didn't talk much during the hike. That's how Ryan liked it, quiet, focused. He was always listening to something. Birds, the wind, water nearby. The trail wound through thick pine forests and climbed gently into higher terrain. By early evening, we picked a spot off the path, about 30 yards into the trees, close enough to the trail that we wouldn't get lost, but far enough to feel private. We set up camp, got a small fire going, and made dinner, instant noodles and jerky. The usual stuff. After we ate, we just sat. The sky was going deep purple. It was one of those windless nights where the fire crackles loud, and every sound from the woods feels closer than it should be. We weren't talking, just watching the fire and listening to the forest settle. That's when we heard it. Footsteps. Not animal rustling or a squirrel darting through undergrowth. These were deliberate. Human. The crunch of leaves and twigs snapping. Someone walking, heavy, slow, not trying to be quiet. Ryan looked up. I grabbed the flashlight, but didn't turn it on yet. The footsteps were off to our left, maybe 30 feet into the dark. We couldn't see anything. We called out. Just a simple hey. Not aggressive, not scared. Nothing came back. No voice. No more steps. We waited. For a long minute, everything was still again. Then the fire popped loud, and I flinched. Ryan shook his head a little, like he was brushing it off. Probably another hiker, we told ourselves. Maybe looking for a place to camp. Maybe they turned around when they heard us. We didn't say much else. We got up, tossed some more wood into the fire, made sure everything was packed up and inside the tent, and crawled in. It took me a while to fall asleep. Every tiny snap of a branch or scurry of leaves kept snapping me awake. But eventually I drifted off. Sometime deep in the night, must have been around 3 a.m., I woke up again. Not suddenly, just sort of eased into it, like something wasn't right. I could hear Ryan breathing steady next to me. Then I heard a noise. Something brushing the side of the tent. At first, I thought it might be a deer or something sniffing around. But then I heard the zipper. Our tent's front zipper, moving slow. Not all at once, just a couple inches. Then stopped. I didn't say anything at first. Just reached slowly for the flashlight by my head. When I grabbed it, I yelled loud and flicked it on. The noise stopped instantly. Ryan shot up, wide-eyed. We both scrambled out fast, still in our base layers. Shoes half on. The cold air slapped us awake. I swept the flashlight beam across the trees, the brush, the ground. Nothing moved. No sound. Just the beam catching tree trunks and the white fabric of our tent behind us. But in the dirt, just outside the tent, was a boot print. Deep, clear, facing the entrance. Not ours. We checked. Different tread pattern. Bigger than mine. Wider than Ryan's. We scanned everywhere with our lights. Circled the area. Every direction. Nothing. No movement. No voices. Just cold, quiet forest. We didn't go back to sleep. We sat by the fire until morning, stoking it back to life and keeping the lights close. We didn't speak much. Every now and then, we'd shine the flashlight out into the trees, just to make sure we were still alone. When the sun finally started pushing light through the trees, we packed fast. Tent, stove, food, everything jammed into our packs with barely a word. I was rolling up the tarp when Ryan said, "Wait." He was standing maybe 200 feet from camp, looking down at something under a tangle of low brush. I walked over. There was a camouflage tarp on the ground, hidden under leaves and sticks. At first glance, it just looked like part of the forest floor. But when we pulled some of the brush aside, we found stuff underneath. A crumpled trail mix wrapper, an empty mini whiskey bottle, a plastic lens cover, the kind that snaps over a small camera or binoculars.
No bag. No sleeping bag.
No food or gear. Just those three things. The dirt around it was disturbed, like someone had been laying there or sitting for a while. And it wasn't old. No dust, no weathering. It looked recent. We didn't dig deeper. We didn't want to. We stood up, looked around once more, then walked back to camp. Threw the last of our stuff into our packs.
No breakfast. No coffee.
Just boots on, straps tight, and we were moving. The whole hike out, I kept turning around. Every 30 feet or so, I'd check behind us. Ryan didn't say a word, just kept his head down and walked hard. The trees felt thicker on the way back, like they were pressing in. Every breeze felt like someone behind us. Every bird call made me twitch. We didn't stop for water.
Didn't stop to rest.
Just got to the trailhead, threw our packs in the back of the car, and left. Neither of us spoke on the drive home. Not for hours. When we got back to Ryan's place, we dropped our stuff in silence. He sat on the couch. I stood in the doorway. I thought maybe we'd talk about it. Try to explain it. But we didn't. We just kind of sat with it. I haven't been back out there since. Ryan hasn't either. We never called the rangers. Never told anyone what we found. Maybe we should have. Maybe it was nothing. But I keep thinking about that lens cap. That tarp. That boot print.
Someone was out there.
And they were watching. It was early November when my buddy Jason and I drove down to Arkansas for a weekend hunting trip. We'd been planning it for a while, just a couple of days out in the woods, no wives, no phones, no noise. We parked our truck at a small pull-off near one of the lesser-used state forest access roads. We were out there mostly for deer, but truth be told, we just wanted the quiet. The weather was cold, but not freezing, somewhere in the 40s, and the trees were still holding on to the last of their leaves. The forest had that damp, earthy smell, rotting leaves, wet dirt, and pine. We had our gear with us, rifles slung, backpacks with snacks, water, and basic supplies. We planned to camp overnight, just far enough in that we wouldn't hear the road traffic. We started down the main trail just after sunrise, but by late morning we'd gone off path. Jason had noticed a narrow side trail that looked like it hadn't been used in years. You could barely tell it was a trail, just a slightly worn line through the brush, half covered with leaves. We decided to follow it for a bit, see where it went. It cut through some thicker forest, winding through deadfall and low branches, the kind of trail where you had to duck now and then and step over logs. About a mile in, it widened out into a small clearing. There were no signs, no trash, no recent footprints. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're not supposed to be there. That's when Jason noticed the tarp. It was off to the side, half hidden under some brush and pine needles. A faded green plastic tarp, weathered and torn at the corners. At first, I thought it might have been an old hunting blind or some forgotten camping gear. Jason knelt down and tugged it back. Beneath it was a rusted metal box, maybe the size of a small cooler, with one broken latch and a thick layer of grime on it. We looked at each other, but didn't say anything. It just felt off. Jason opened it. Inside were several clear Ziploc bags, stuffed full of cash, bills of all kinds, mostly 20s and 10s, but a few 50s too. The rubber bands around them had started to crack. Mixed in were a few driver's licenses, none from Arkansas. I remember one from Texas, one from Missouri, another from Georgia. All different names, different faces. There was also a small black pistol tucked into the corner of the box. It looked clean, newer than the box itself. I stared at it, heart beating louder than it should have been. I remember how cold the air felt all of a sudden, like something shifted. Neither of us touched anything. We just crouched there, staring at it. I couldn't stop thinking about the IDs. Those weren't hunting supplies. That wasn't someone stashing away emergency cash. It felt like we'd just found something we weren't supposed to find. Then we heard it. A car door slammed. Not close, but not far either. Sharp and distinct, like it had been shut with purpose. Jason and I froze. We looked at each other, wide-eyed. There was no road nearby. The nearest paved road was over a mile away, and we hadn't seen or heard another person all morning. We hadn't passed any parked vehicles. There were no trailheads or campsites in that direction. But we had just heard a car door shut somewhere in the trees. We didn't say a word. Jason slowly pulled the tarp back over the box, careful not to make noise. I kept scanning the woods around us, heart hammering in my ears. Every instinct was screaming at me to move, to leave, to get out now. We backed away from the clearing and turned back the way we came, moving fast but quiet. I kept looking over my shoulder. I didn't hear any footsteps, but the forest felt wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us. I kept expecting to hear a branch snap behind us or see someone step out from behind a tree. We didn't speak until we were back near the main trail.
Even then, we didn't say much. Just a few nods, grunts.
We didn't need to talk about it. We knew whatever we had stumbled on wasn't meant to be found. We made it back to the truck without incident. We drove a few miles before stopping at a gas station. That's when we finally spoke about what we saw. We agreed not to call anyone directly. We didn't want our names involved, but we couldn't just ignore it either. Jason used a burner email account he had for junk mail and sent an anonymous tip to the ranger station with GPS coordinates as close as we could remember. He made it short, something like, "Found box in woods near here. Looks suspicious. Might want to check." Weeks passed. We didn't hear anything. We figured maybe they looked into it, maybe they didn't. Maybe someone got to it before the rangers did. The box might have been moved, burned, buried again deeper. We stopped talking about it. Then, about a year later, I was eating breakfast, scrolling through the news on my phone, when I saw a headline that stopped me cold. Fugitive armed robbery suspect captured in Ouachita National Forest. The article was short, just a paragraph or two, but the details were enough. The man had been wanted in connection with a string of armed robberies across several states. He'd been hiding in remote forest areas, moving every few weeks. Law enforcement said he had a long history of changing identities and had been found in possession of multiple fake IDs and large amounts of cash. He'd been arrested after a brief standoff in a makeshift camp about 10 miles from where Jason and I had found that box. The article didn't say anything about the box or any discovery by hikers. But I knew. I sat there staring at the screen, hand frozen over my coffee. I felt cold all over again. Not scared exactly, just heavy, like the weight of that moment had finally caught up to me. That box we found, it wasn't just some stash. It was real. It was part of something bigger, something dangerous. Jason and I never went back to that trail. We still hunt sometimes, still go into the woods, but never that deep and never in that part of Arkansas. Every now and then we'll look at each other when the woods get quiet, and I know we're both thinking about it. About how close we might have come to running into that guy. About what could have happened if we'd stuck around 5 minutes longer. Or if we'd touched the gun. Or taken the money. But we didn't. We left it. We walked away. And in the end, that might have saved our lives. I was backpacking alone through a stretch of woods in West Virginia, somewhere near the Monongahela National Forest. It was early fall, late October, and the trees were still holding onto their color, deep reds, oranges, and the last of the gold. The air had that dry, crisp feel, the kind that hits your lungs and makes you feel awake. I'd been hiking most of the day, a little over 12 miles, following a poorly marked trail that twisted along a narrow ridgeline before dropping into a thick valley. I planned to camp near a creek I'd seen on the map, about a quarter mile off the trail. By the time I reached the creek, the sun was low, the light going orange through the trees. The spot seemed decent: flat ground, soft leaf cover, and the water nearby for refilling. I dropped my pack, stretched out my back, and got to setting up my small one-person tent. I had a little stove for boiling water, and I started getting dinner together, just dehydrated noodles and jerky. I'd just finished laying out my ground sheet when I heard something odd. A whistle. 3 short notes, repeated in the same pattern, over and over again. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp and deliberate. I froze for a second, listening. It didn't sound like a bird or any animal I could think of. It had that human rhythm to it, like someone had practiced the same little tune again and again. I scanned the woods in every direction, but saw nothing. The trees were dense, and the evening light made everything blend together. I called out, more out of instinct than anything, just a quick hello, but got nothing back. No footsteps, no rustling, just that whistle. 3 notes, then silence. After about 5 minutes of nothing, I went back to setting up. I didn't like it, but there wasn't much else I could do. It was too late to hike back out, and the next marked site was several miles further. I finished dinner, cleaned up, and zipped myself into the tent by 9. It got cold quick once the sun dropped. I bundled into my sleeping bag and tried not to think about that sound. Told myself maybe it was another hiker far off, maybe someone camped further down the creek. But around midnight, I woke up. No reason, just came out of sleep suddenly, heart thudding like it does when your brain thinks something's wrong. I stayed still, listening, and then I heard it again. 3 notes. That same whistle. Only this time, it was closer. Much closer. It sounded like it came from maybe 30 yards away. The whistle was slow, like whoever was doing it wasn't in any rush. Just standing out there in the dark, repeating the same tune every 30 seconds. I turned off my little battery lamp, sat up slowly, every part of me on edge. I pulled my knife from the side pocket of my backpack and laid it across my lap. My breath felt loud. I couldn't see anything through the tent walls, just the shadows of branches above. The whistle came again, a little off to the right now. Then, a minute later, it came from the left. It was like someone was walking a wide circle around my camp, keeping the same rhythm, repeating those same damn 3 notes like they wanted me to hear it, but didn't care if I saw them. I didn't move. I didn't unzip the tent. I didn't make a sound. I just sat there in the dark, gripping that knife, so tight my hands hurt. It went on like that for almost an hour. Same pattern, same pace. The whistle would come, shift positions, come again. Always just close enough that I could tell it wasn't an echo or a trick of the woods. It was someone out there watching me. Then, all at once, it stopped. Just silence. No footsteps. No breaking branches. Just dead, heavy silence that made the woods feel like a closed room. I stayed sitting up, frozen, for what felt like forever. I waited for something, anything, but nothing came. Eventually, maybe around 2 or 3, I must have dozed off from exhaustion. I woke again with the sky pale and the birds starting to make noise. I unzipped the tent slowly, half expecting to see something waiting out there, but it was just the same quiet forest. The same creek, the same trees, except for one thing. Near the edge of the fire pit I'd made the night before, someone or something had built a little structure out of sticks. It was maybe 2 feet tall, maybe a foot wide. Twigs and branches snapped clean, stuck into the ground in a tight pattern. It wasn't random. It looked like a symbol. A triangle on top of a rectangle, with a horizontal stick across the middle like a crossbar. Each joint was wrapped with thin vines, like it had been put together with care. I just stood there for a while staring at it. It hadn't been there when I went to sleep. There were no tracks, no footprints. Just that strange little structure, standing there like a warning or a message. I didn't even pack properly. I crammed everything into my pack as fast as I could, tore down the tent without folding it, and got moving. I didn't care about the trail. I didn't even try to follow my original route back. I just moved uphill until I hit the ridgeline, then kept going north until I found the forest road again. Took me most of the day, but I didn't stop once. I didn't look back. Later, I tried to figure out what that whistle might mean. I asked a few people online. Some said it could have been a poacher's signal. Others said it might have been a local warning. One guy even said it was a known trick in some areas to mess with hikers. But nobody could tell me what the stick structure meant. Some thought it was just a weird camp ritual. Others said it might have been a territorial marker. Whatever it was, I never went back. I've done plenty of hikes since then, plenty of solo trips, but I've never camped in that part of West Virginia again. I won't even drive through it if I can help it. And that whistle? It still plays in my dreams sometimes. Same 3 notes, every 30 seconds, over and over, like someone walking just outside the edge of the firelight, waiting for me to fall asleep. I was solo camping in the Allegheny National Forest, deep in Pennsylvania. I'd been planning the trip for weeks. I wanted something remote, no marked trails, no other campers, just forest and silence. I parked my car off a small dirt road and hiked 5 miles in with my pack. No service, no sign of people, just trees and hills and the sound of wind in the leaves. It was exactly what I wanted, a break from everything. The first day was peaceful. I spent it setting up camp, finding a level spot near a small creek. I hung my food bag, collected firewood, and pitched my tent in a small clearing surrounded by thick trees. By evening, I had a small fire going. I boiled water for some freeze-dried food and watched the sky go from pale blue to black. That night, the forest was alive with sound, crickets, the occasional hoot of an owl, a few distant rustlings in the underbrush. Nothing unusual. I slept well. The second day, I hiked further into the woods, following the creek upstream. I carried a day pack with some water and a snack, kept my compass in my pocket. It was warm, clear, and absolutely silent once I got deeper in. No people, no aircraft, nothing. I didn't see a single footprint that wasn't mine. Around late afternoon, I headed back to camp, feeling a little tired but good. Being out there cleared my head. That night, after dinner, I sat by the fire a while, sharpening my knife, just something to do. When I turned in, it was probably around 10 p.m. I zipped the tent shut, got into my sleeping bag, and listened to the sounds around me. Normal forest noise, nothing strange. Until about 2 a.m., I woke up suddenly. No dream, no real reason I could tell, just alert all at once. The fire had gone out. The forest was dark, absolutely pitch black, except for the faint outline of trees when I looked through the mesh at the top of my tent. I stayed still, listening. Then I heard it. A scream. Not an animal. Not even close. It was a woman's scream, sharp, loud, and filled with panic. It came from somewhere off to the left, maybe 100 yards away. It echoed in the trees, bouncing around in that way sound does when there's nothing to absorb it. My body locked up. I didn't move, didn't breathe for a second. I just sat up in my sleeping bag and stared at the tent wall. Another scream followed a few seconds later. It was different, more ragged, like someone trying to yell but they were exhausted or terrified. There were no words, just sound, just fear. I didn't know what to do. It didn't make sense. I was miles from any road, way off trail. Nobody should have been out here, especially not a woman, screaming in the middle of the night. I stayed still. I didn't unzip the tent. I didn't call out. My instincts screamed at me not to make a sound. My heart was hammering in my chest. I reached for my knife and kept it in my hand. I killed my lantern. I sat there in the dark, waiting, trying to control my breathing. Then I heard it, branches snapping, fast footsteps. Someone was running through the woods. crashing through the brush. It was heavy, not a deer, not some small animal. It sounded like a person, running fast, and then right outside my tent. I heard it. Something moved past. Heavy steps, someone stumbling, breathing hard. It was so close I could hear the air catching in their throat. And then just like that, it was gone. No more steps, no more breathing, just silence. I sat frozen for at least an hour, gripping that knife, afraid to move. I didn't even want to unzip the tent to peek out. I kept imagining someone standing just a few feet away, watching, waiting. Eventually, when the sky started to turn faintly gray and the birds began to call, I slowly got up. I packed in a rush, barely ate anything. My hands were shaking. I tore down the tent, shoved everything into my pack, without much care. I didn't even try to follow the sound or see where the footsteps had gone. I didn't want to know. I just hiked back the way I'd come in double time. My eyes kept darting to the trees. Every sound made my skin crawl. I kept the knife in my pocket and didn't stop moving. It took me 3 hours to get back to my car. I drove straight home. I didn't even stop for gas until I was back near the interstate. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone had gotten lost, but it didn't make sense. That scream, that raw panic, it wasn't just someone confused in the woods. It was something worse. I didn't sleep well for the next few nights. A week later, I was scrolling through local news online. That's when I saw the article. A woman had escaped from a man who'd abducted her from a highway rest stop in another county, maybe 30 or 40 miles from where I'd camped. She'd gotten away while he was distracted and ran into the woods, barefoot and injured. A hunter found her at dawn the next day. The timeline matched. The article didn't say much about the man or what happened before or after, just that the police were investigating and the woman was recovering. But I knew what I'd heard. It still gives me chills thinking about it, how close she must have been, how helpless she sounded, and how lucky I was that the person chasing her didn't stop at my tent. If I'd made a sound, turned on my lantern, unzipped the tent, anything, they might have seen me. I might have ended up in the news myself. I haven't been back to Allegheny since. I still hike, still camp, but not alone, not in places that remote. That scream, it wasn't something I'll ever forget. It didn't sound human in the way we think. It sounded like pure fear, something a person only makes when they know they might die. And now, sometimes when I sleep, I dream of that moment again. The scream in the dark, the footsteps, the breathing. And I wonder how many others have heard something like that and never told anyone.